Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Nicole, and on today's episode, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, how to support and raise our children in ways that allow them to grow into the best versions of themselves as they enter adulthood. I've worked with kids, young adults, and families for over 20 years, and one of the biggest challenges I see is parents engaging in what we call overparenting behaviors with the best of intentions, but not realizing that this way of parenting doesn't necessarily provide our kids with the experiences and tools they need to develop a sense of personal competence. And this shows up lots of ways throughout childhood, but nowhere is it more clear than when kids enter the world of whatever is beyond high school for them, and they need to start navigating life on their own. It's become more common for me to sit in my office with parents and young adults who have bottomed out in college or failed to move forward with a plan after high school. They're now at home with debilitating anxiety, depression, and feeling like they have a lack of purpose in their lives because they've left the safety net of home and don't think that they can handle life. And it's at this point when I find that many parents start to wonder if their well-intentioned efforts to protect and manage their child were the best thing to do. But the good news is we can all start to think differently about this with our kids right now, whether they're 2 or whether they're 20, no matter what the challenges or special needs may be. So to help us understand this trap of overparenting, how we can engage with our kids in ways that prepare them for success in adulthood, I've invited Julie Lythcott-Haims on the show today. Let me tell you a bit about her. She believes in humans and is deeply interested in what gets in our way. She's the New York Times bestselling author of the anti-helicopter parenting manifesto, How to Raise an Adult. Her TED Talk on the subject has more than 5 million views. One of my favorite TED Talks out there. Definitely go check that out. And in 2020, she became a regular contributor with CBS This Morning on parenting. Her second book is the critically acclaimed and award-winning prose poetry memoir, Real American, which illustrates her experience as a Black and biracial person in white spaces. A third book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, will be out in April 2021. Julie's a former corporate lawyer and Stanford dean. She holds a BA from Stanford, a JD from Harvard, and an MFA in writing from California College of the Arts. She serves on several boards for organizations doing meaningful work in the world and is a mother of young adult children. I have been a huge fan of Julie and her work for many years, was beyond honored when she agreed to be on the show. Julie, such a thrill to have you with us today. Welcome.
Dr. Nicole, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be having this conversation with you.
I feel like there could almost not be a better time with everything going on in the world right now. The struggles, we're spending more time than ever before with our kids. Many people are waking up to some of the ways in which they're parenting, some of the dynamics with their kids. So perfect timing for this. I want to start out because in your TED Talk, and I've heard you speak many times, you say that you didn't set out to be a parenting expert, but you've written a book about parenting. You speak about it all the time. I'd love for you to share with our audience how you became interested in the ways that we parent and how that impacts our kids.
Sure thing. So I was the dean of freshmen at Stanford University for 10 years. And for the first 7 of those 10 years, I noticed something that was just bothering me more and more. Every year we'd have more students who were really dependent on their parents to manage the stuff of life, tracking deadlines, talking to professors if the student's grade wasn't high enough, dealing with roommate disputes, just stuff that in the early days of this would make you go, what is happening? You know, these people could be in the army, but they're at college. Why do they need so much help? Mm-hmm. And it intrigued, it first humored me, then it intrigued me, then it concerned me as I saw the numbers growing. And by the way, I was witnessing this on my campus. This was a problem nationwide. I just happened to be at Stanford to see it, but every college administrator could tell you what I just said about what was happening really in the last decade. You know, in the early 2000s, we began to notice it. And parents were just more involved in the day-to-day management of life. And I put 2 and 2 together and saw, wait a minute, students are less capable, parents are more involved. What is this gonna mean for these students when they grow up? Will they grow up? Will they always be tethered on a leash to a parent? And if so, what's to become of them? And if so, what's to become of society? I really was quite alarmed. And I would talk about it, and I would give speeches about it. And then one day, 7 years into this, endeavor to sort of draw attention to this issue, this was well before I wrote my book, I came home for dinner one night with my own family. My kids are 10 and 8. And I sit down next to my 10-year-old and I begin to cut his meat. And that was my aha moment. Like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be one of those people that I'm laughing about on my campus. If you're cutting, there's the point. 10 is too old to be cutting somebody's food. And you might say, well, the knives are sharp. Yes, but don't start with the big machete knives. Start with a butter knife. Like, they have to learn the fine motor skills of gripping stuff and how do you do this. We're supposed to teach them. And that was my literal metaphor. It was like happening in my house. I could see you can't let go of an 18-year-old on a college campus if you've been cutting the meat of a 10-year-old. Yeah. Because of all the skills that kid has to learn by doing before they're ever independent enough to leave our homes and fend for themselves. So I became complicit in the problem. And I was even more invested, therefore, in trying to figure out why we do this and how we can undo it.
Absolutely. And I think so many of us, we've had those moments with our own kids, even when we, are telling other people about it, we suddenly realize like, oh my gosh, I'm doing that too. I have absolutely had those moments that my listeners know. I talk about my own experiences on the show because there's nothing like having your own children to humble you as a professional and make you realize, yeah, it's easy to tell people things. It's hard to do them ourselves. So I love that, that you shared that personal experience with that. I want to delve into a little bit this idea of overdoing things for our kids, or maybe like in the example you just gave, continuing to do things for our kids long after they are capable of learning how to do that for themselves. We use lots of terms for this, right? People are familiar with maybe helicopter parenting. Now we've got these terms like lawnmower parenting, all of these kinds of things, this idea of overparenting. How do you describe that?
Yeah, the terms are there for a reason because it's helpful to have a visual metaphor. I'm nowadays writing about the rise of stealth parenting, which is how I characterize the constant GPS tracking, constantly looking at kids' grades online and web cameras in the home. There's just a surveillance nature to parenting that I think as a psychologist, you can appreciate better than most. Will harm our children. The only people who are surveilled 24/7 are incarcerated persons and people in psychiatric facilities. Until now, that was sort of special status we reserve for people who might be harmful to themselves or others. But now it's routine in American childhood. Okay, so just to add another term, stealth parenting. But here are the behaviors. I identify 3 distinct behaviors. The first is, and a parent could be doing one of these overparenting behaviors, or they could be doing 2 or all 3, okay? The first, in no particular order, the first type is the overprotective parent who's very afraid, very worried, has this like, you never know what could happen mentality. And look, a lot of fears are legitimate. It's just the response that's wrong. We need to prepare our kids to be tough and strong out there in the world rather than delude ourselves that if I can just keep my eye on them at all times, they'll be fine. It's delusional, if only because you'll be dead and gone one day. And then what? Your kid will just be this floundering person who's never had to sort of develop that sense of safety and security from their own behaviors and choices and consequences. So overprotective. The second type is the fiercely directive. You will be a doctor. You will be a, engineer, right? My plan for you is this. It's a very arrogant sense. Sometimes there's a bit of an immigrant mentality, which is I really sacrificed a lot to get you to a place where you could thrive and achieve. And that sense of achievement is the problem. It's so narrowly defined. But I understand that it can come from a good place. But nevertheless, it leaves a child feeling that I am loved conditionally. I am loved when. I get the grades and the scores and do this and that to get to the outcome my parents have in mind for me. The third type is the concierge. This is the parent who's like your concierge or your fixer, your handler, the person with the clipboard who's always there to say, don't forget this, or I'll take care of that for you. Tracking your deadlines, bringing you your forgotten things. You know, a combination of the fiercely directive and the concierge is the person who's gonna track your grades, and then when your chemistry grade falls too low, that person is gonna then, that parent is going to argue with the chemistry teacher about why they didn't grade you differently. That person's going to argue with your boss about why you didn't get a raise. And that is happening, you know, so those are the three types. And I see myself in a couple of them.
Well, there is this pull for all of us to those pieces, because really, you know, I look at this issue of overparenting. It meets a significant need we have as parents, as adults, as individuals, to feel like we are doing enough. We are being competent with our kids. And a lot of it is about soothing our own anxieties and discomfort, right? And so recognizing those patterns that we say that we're doing these things for our kids, and on one level we are, but on another deeper level, we're really engaging in these behaviors because it's soothing and helpful to us.
Which is why I think therapy is going to be a boom industry for the next 30 to 40 years, because it all comes back to that. I tell parents, you know, my keynote is like an hour and 15 minutes. When it's live, I'm blunt as heck, but I'm funny too. And people are crying, but they're also laughing. And one of the laugh points, and I'm not going to get it right here because the timing is off, but it's like, as I've laid out why this is problematic and why we must stop, I say, like, you know, if any of this is hard for you, get some therapy. You know, like, this is, the point is, like, you got to work out your own stuff. Why do I feel so unsafe at the thought that my kid might get the wrong grade today on a piece of homework or on an exam or in an entire class? Like, where did we get this sense that this is the best metaphor I can come up with is like, our child is a dog. We are the trainer. We are entering the dog in a dog show, hoping to win best in breed. But at the end of the day, that dog, who in a real dog sense is going to eat a yummy dish of dog food and get some treats, but we are the ones who cognitively know, like, I made that happen. My dog, look, you know, the praise comes on me, the person who owns and then breeds this dog. But they're not dogs is the point. They're humans, you know? So this intermeshed sense of ego is so unhealthy for us and for them.
And it's a big part of why at my clinic, we have a very big focus on working with families as a unit, and really actually doing a lot more direct work with parents than we even do with kids because of these dynamics. And to be clear, this is not about blaming parents for kids' challenges. Absolutely not. But it is us being aware enough to recognize that the ways in which we parent, the ways in which we behave towards our kids and with our kids, the ways in which we engage them, a significant part of that comes from our own needs and our own stuff. And so it's not just about, here, I present my child for therapy, do something with them to fix this problem, right? It's like, no, we're going to need to look at the entire system here.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things that has changed in our society, and let's be clear, there's a lot of class-based dynamics to this too. In order to be able to dote on your child's every moment, you got to have time and money on your hands, you know. Beautiful irony for me when I was a college dean was to notice, and this is sort of anecdotal evidence, not anything I studied, but to notice that the students on my campus who were poor and working class, first generation college students, tended to have a degree of self-reliance, autonomy, resilience, responsibility taking that their more affluent peers lacked. And it was this beautiful strength that kids who were seemingly at risk of being less successful, they actually had this strength that they earned the hard way because childhood had been a little tougher. experience. And it was sort of really an interesting comparison.
It's a great way to observe that. And it makes me think about something that I've heard you talk about, which is the really critical difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy, and how so often we're focused as parents on the self-esteem, the how does that look, the accolades, the awards, the you won the game, you whatever. But self-efficacy is something different and actually infinitely more important, right?
Yeah. You're the psychologist, not me. So I have read Albert Bandura and other psychologists' work, and I understand that self-efficacy and its twin concept, almost agency,
Yeah.
Are so critical to our psychological wellness. They are literally the foundation of the knowing of our own existence. And I know this sounds a little woo-woo, or it sounds too academic, or it sounds complicated, but it is that deep-seated sense in our own being that we must have, that we exist, that we can do things, not become an amazing famous person, but like literally I am capable. I exist. I know that when I act, there is a result. I know that when I do this, that will happen. I can set a course of action for myself today, now the next task in front of me, and I can do it and see results. And the trouble with overparenting is, even though we do it so lovingly, and believe me, I know, I adore my kids like everybody does, I was just trying to help them when I was cutting his meat and velcroing his shoes too long, and like all of that, just trying to help, but it interrupts the natural development of self-efficacy, because self-efficacy is like, I see that my actions have outcomes, not my parents' actions for me have outcomes. No, the psyche needs to see I did that. And when we overparent, we are just chopping that correlation causation thing in half. It doesn't, the kid's mind knows I didn't do that. They did that.
Right.
And studies show that that leads to a learned helplessness, which leads to anxiety, depression, right? It's a withering of the psyche. And I've seen it. I've seen it in the lives of young adults I've worked with, and I've seen it a little bit in my own home, and without crossing too many privacy boundaries, you know, I am that parent trying to show up now for my 21 and 19-year-olds, finally, as the parents they deserve and need. I am doing so much work to figure out where I have been complicit in laying down some of these patterns in my own kids' lives, learning what I need to learn, studying up more, asking tougher questions of myself. And I'm on this journey with anyone listening who is in agony over this. I am in it with you. And I'm really grateful, Dr. Nicole, that you're here really with your clinic and with these conversations, kind of helping us not blame ourselves. You know, like, I do believe in taking some responsibility. Like, yep, I did that. I know that. It's not about blaming me, but I want to own up to it. Like, yeah, there's some things I could have done differently, but more importantly, what can I do now? And let me give you one important story.
Yeah.
My son, diagnosed with ADD in the 4th grade. Wee bit of anxiety. So we barely paid attention to it, because what we did pay attention to was his brilliance, his amazingness. Has been this voracious reader since he was a tiny boy, headed to science, headed to research, headed to a PhD, like tests well, like just, all I could see was that. I'm actually now I'm being a caricature of myself, telling you how I would talk about myself. I wouldn't literally tell people he's brilliant, but I was just so busting with pride over my kid, and really kind of ignoring these issues that didn't really seem to be in the way because he was so smart, kind of mentality. Well, then he goes to college, very rigorous, small liberal arts college, and without the scaffolding of home and high school and the food we would provide and the schedule of the day, he began a slow unravel, which then dinged his confidence, which then further deteriorates. I mean, I know this. I'm a former college dean. I've seen this in myself. That's why I became a college dean. I've seen this in other people's kids, and now my own kid. Well, at the end of sophomore year, he decided I need some time off. I needed to figure myself out. We said, terrific, we understand. We bought all the books on anxiety and depression, but anxiety and ADD is what I meant to say. And my husband and I were reading these books like, oh my gosh, what's going on with this? We're reading these books, flagging these books up with Post-it notes, passing them back and forth. He comes home for the summer. He sees the books stacked on his dad's desk. accidentally kind of, they were, near the printer where my son had gone in to get some paper. And he comes out of his dad's office and he says, "Mom, I saw the books on Dad's desk." And I just almost cried because I feared he was going to say, "Don't pathologize me, don't." And instead, he said, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Thank you for taking an interest in better understanding who I am."
Mm.
Yeah. And I said, "I am very interested, and I'm so sorry that I haven't understood you well enough to this point, and I'm here for all of it. I am here to be the parent you deserve, to figure out how I can be of most use to you, and whatever I need to deal with on my own feelings and issues, when I need to do that work also, so that I can be the parent you deserve now as you journey forward."
Mm-hmm. So powerful. And I really am so grateful that you shared that, because I know that's resonating with the minds and the hearts of so many of our listeners, whether they have young kids now or they're in the midst of that young adulthood. I think there is even more a tendency for this to happen when we do have a child with some challenges, with some needs. That idea of sort of over focusing on the areas where they can shine and be successful, or focusing on them getting through the certain checklist of quote unquote normal things that kids are supposed to do. And what that doesn't leave the space for is our child to realize that we love every part of them, that every part of them is valuable and important to who they are. And we can lose sight of that. And so you just shared such a beautiful example of that. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And so you're in the midst of this now with a young adult. So many of the families that I work with, same thing. And they're saying now at this stage in their child's life, like, whoa, I see where this has created some problems. I need to now figure how to unwind that or do some things differently. The learned helplessness piece, I want to touch on that a second, because there is so much research about that in kids with, whether it's ADHD or anxiety or learning disabilities or autism, whatever it is. A lot of research on that with our educational system, and how we, with the best of intentions, work with these kids in ways that lead them towards a significant amount of learned helplessness, and in the parenting realm too. So I think that just spotlights for people how important it is with any child, but especially if you have a child with some needs, to be paying attention to this, because we do know that this sense of learned helplessness, which is this idea that no matter what I do, it doesn't change the outcomes. I've learned to be helpless, to rely on other people to manage things, to make things work out. I don't feel that on my own I can do that. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, that's just kind of a brief descriptor. But I think that that gets to the core of, it's never our intention to raise kids who have this sense of learned helplessness, who feel like they don't have agency or competence or ability to do things in their lives. But it happens, and it happens because we're busy thinking about other things and doing other things. So how can we think about doing that differently? How can we approach that in a way that's more helpful for our kids?
I mean, I will turn that question right back on you, because I'm hoping you have all the answers, Dr. Nicole. So I'll give you my thoughts as I've approached this based on my observations and everything I've read and learned, and I'm trying to now practice in my family. I think the first thing, so if you've got young kids, thank goodness, because you have the time to lay the correct patterns down. I'm in this place of, I got a 21-year-old, 19-year-old, and I'm looking back at like, oh, if I could repave that road, okay, but I can't, right? I can only try to undo it and straighten it out going forward. That is my relationship with my young adults, what I do for them instead of standing next to them and near them and rooting for them and watching them do it themselves. Mm-hmm. So see how I just did this? Like, we're on video. You can see me, like, I am trying to create a healthier distance between me and my kids. And I almost want to like hold up a picture of them, but anyway. Okay. So couple things, two things I want to tell you. We are supposed to be teaching our kids skills. Okay. To win the the parenting game is to have a young adult who can fend for themselves, barring significant special needs that require a constant attendant. Our job is to ensure that we've raised this person to be able to care for themselves and go out and find work, kind of just the basics of fending. That's to win. So instead of raising kids to be dependent on us, to be having to look for us for signals and cues and handle everything, you know, we are the sous chef and they think they're the famous chef. Like, they don't realize we've done all the chopping and buying and preparing, and we've handed it all they have to do is like toss it in a pan. That's sort of how you can create a learned helplessness. Although also this false sense of achievement, like they think they've created this amazing meal, but you've actually done all the work. That's probably not learned helplessness. That's a different problem. But anyway, it still undermines their skills because they can't actually make that meal without you. Okay. 4-step method for teaching any kid any skill. First, you do it for them, then you do it with them, then you watch them do it, and finally they can do it independently. And this is cross the street, make a meal, tie your shoes, like it applies to everything. There's a lovely little animated video that the Atlantic magazine did where they have cartoon characters demonstrating this with me doing the voiceover. I'll give it to you for the show notes. It's just
love it.
Horrible. But you can picture it, you know, cross the street. First you do it for them, you carry them in your arms. Then you do it with them. You're holding their hand, narrating out loud about how you look left, right, and left, teaching. Slowly do it time and time again. Don't do it when you're busy. You're trying to teach your kid. You're holding their hand. Step 3, you watch them do it. You're still there just in case they step out too early. You can slow it down. You practice step 3 enough. Step 4, your kid can cross the street without you. Not at age 5, but age 10, too many 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds are still being kind of coddled, walked across the street. And you want to shout at people like, what's your long-term strategy here? You know? Second thing, this degree of distance. I had a mom call me and say, I've got a son who's 16, biological son. I've got a son who's adopted, who's 2 years younger. I love them both fiercely, but this son is in therapeutic boarding school. And this son is doing just fine and is at home. Biological, adopted. Biological son is part of family therapy with the parents on the phone weekly. And in therapy, he told his mom, Mom, when you remind me of every single thing, or when you say, have you done that yet? It makes me think you don't think I can. And it also sometimes makes me want to just rebel and say, fine, you know, I'm not going to do it because you feel the need to remind me. This mother calls me up and says, Julie, I get it. I just figured it out. My son said that. It was hard to hear. I realize I do that to him, but I don't do that to the adopted son. Why? This mother says, because I know that my biological son, half of his genetic makeup comes from me. I feel responsible for his outcomes. How he achieves in the world reflects back on my genes. Whereas my adopted kid, I just root for him and love him to become who he is because I don't feel responsible. She said, I realize I have the healthier relationship with my adopted son. And I think that's such a beautiful illustration. It also holds for, you know, when our nieces and nephews, our friends' kids are struggling in a class, we don't feel the need to go yell at the teacher or micromanage them through it. We just offer empathy. Oh, I'm sorry you're struggling. Let me know if I can be of help. I love you. Tell me something good that is happening in your life. That's the healthy flow of conversation we should be having with our own kids. We can bring it to other people's kids, but we are so enmeshed with our own kids, as this woman demonstrated with noticing the differences between how responsible she feels for son number 1 versus son number 2. I hope that those examples give some people some insights into kind of what the healthier distance is and what the unhealthy closeness can lead to.
Absolutely great examples. And I want to say to our listeners who have kids with more significant special needs, this same process applies. It may just be on a longer time span, right? So we're looking at what's developmentally appropriate, and it can take longer for our kids with more significant special needs to meet some of these milestones, but the intent and the process is the same. So sometimes I'll have parents say to me, well, you know, I have to do all this for him because you don't understand, he's got all these severe learning disabilities and he's got severe ADHD and he's got all this anxiety, and so I have to. No, we may need to break it down into smaller pieces. Those first steps that you talked about with, or the second two steps, actually doing it with and then doing it nearby, those may take longer for kids with challenges. But that doesn't mean that we just revert to stage one and say, well, I just have to keep doing it for you because these are going to take longer. It means we have to be willing to be in those stages of doing with them and then letting them have experience with it for longer.
Yeah. I mean, this is what's really hard for a lot of parents to hear. This is where technology has facilitated us in being our child's forever caretaker. And I think the type 1 diabetes community is a great example of what things can look like today versus 20 years ago, when these sort of technologies that allow you to monitor somebody else's blood glucose at a distance didn't exist.
Yep.
Kids who were type 1 diabetics 20 years ago had to have a degree of self-reliance and responsibility that allowed them to be more in charge of their lives and accountable for their own safety and health and wellness and life. That was a good thing. And now we've got, I can manage it. And you're not teaching your kid to be responsible. You're so worried about what might happen, and I get that. But remember, one day you'll be gone, and you don't want that day to be the first day your kid has to manage their own diagnosis themselves. It's actually the cruelest thing in the world to hold on to them until you die, and then it's like, they're totally helpless.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not criticizing anybody in that community. I'm making the point that the greatest love we can offer is to teach someone to do for themselves. If you're religious, it goes back to Jesus and, give a man a fish or teach a man to fish. We're supposed to be teaching our kids to fish in every regard.
Absolutely. And that requires us getting comfortable with the idea that our kids are going to have uncomfortable experiences. They're going to have failure experiences, and that is entirely normal and actually developmentally appropriate and necessary. When we rob our kids of those opportunities to learn from their mistakes, to get themselves into problems and have to problem solve their way out, we really rob them of learning what I think are the much more valuable things that they need to know and understand to be successful in adulthood, way more important than the outcome of their science class or, how much literature they read or what college they go to. These kinds of life skills and these skills of resilience and problem solving and competence, these are infinitely more important in the big picture.
I call the following set of words life's beautiful F words. Okay. We have the F word we're not supposed to say.
Right.
These are the beautiful F words: failure or failing, falling, floundering, fumbling. Okay. These are like, but we don't, right? Childhood is supposed to teach our kids the lessons that come after those things have happened. That is how our kids get stronger. I have a wonderful list in How to Raise an Adult. I'm trying to find it because it's actually someone else's list that I want to just quote. This is in How to Raise an Adult. I'm quoting the book Gist by Michael Anderson and Tim Johansson. They're both in the Minneapolis area. They published a book in 2013 called Gist, which I quote in my book, How to Raise an Adult. And what I quoted was this list they have of mistakes and curveballs you must let your kid experience in order for them to grow, not just the skill of, I should do it differently next time, but the resilience of, it turns out that hurt, or I was embarrassed or ashamed or sad, but I'm okay. I got over it. When we overhelp, we deprive them both of the skill and of the ability to develop resilience. So anyway, that's an important thing. I want you also to know, I call it the arc. When people are like, well, what are we supposed to do? I mean, you open the show saying, how can we raise our kids to allow them to lead the best versions of themselves? And I wrote that down because allow is,
Mm.
we need to just back off and let life teach them so that they will be the best versions of themselves. How do we allow is like, people ask me, so what do I do to give my child resilience? And I say, you can't give them resilience, but you can take it away. Okay. How can I give my child agency is sort of an oxymoron. No, you can't give someone agency, right? But you can take it away. So my solution is what I call, and I've got a little, thanks to Zoom, I have my little
nice
whiteboard. I call it the arc. The arc of childhood, the arc of adulting. ARC stands for agency, resilience, and character.
Yeah.
That's the arc. That's the path that will lead them to the successful, happy, healthy adult life that you crave for them and that they crave for themselves. Agency is I can. Resilience is I can cope. And character is there's more to this world than me. I have to show up in ways that are good and kind to others. How you behave, how you behave in a way that's good. So those to me are the building blocks or the arc. I'm still developing the metaphor, but we shouldn't be undermining any of those things.
I love that. It's such an easy acronym to remember too. In your book, you talk about some very tangible ways that parents can focus on this. So one example, things like chores, which I loved. When I first heard you talking about that, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's somebody else who talks about chores, because I feel like that is like one of the foundations. And kids, my own kids roll their eyes, parents that I work with, but I'm like, this is a foundation. It's important for kids to do chores, right?
Absolutely. For so many reasons. It's a great way to just have an internal mechanism in the home that demonstrates we all have to show up and contribute to this organization called our family. When a child's been raised that way, then they're going to go into the workplace and know like work has to be done and it's not always glamorous and someone's got to do it in order to improve things for everyone. So if you've raised a child without doing chores, without a child who's always sort of served and handled and managed and never asked to do something to benefit the team, they are not desirable employees. So chores equals better workplace behavior. There's a long study of humans that shows that professional success in life, at the end of life, when they studied like, were you successful? Okay, you were. What did all those successful people have in common? They did chores as a kid or had a part-time job, because you're just building a work ethic and a sense of obligation and a willingness to pitch in. I want to always roll up my sleeves when I say this, like pitch in, useful. Don't just sit around waiting to, for life to happen to you or for others to serve you.
And one of the ways that I see that show up is kids, two types of situations. One is kids whose parents were so invested in giving them every extracurricular opportunity to get a leg up, right? Every sports, every arts thing, just had them so involved. And they would say, well, they can't do chores. They don't have time to do chores because they're doing all these other important things, and that creating a problem. And then the other place that I see that is parents of kids who maybe are struggling in school or struggling in various areas, and they've got them in so many therapies and so many tutorings and so many things that they say, well, we can't, do chores or do these things at home because these things are more important. And it's really that resetting of what we view as important in the big picture of our kids' lives.
Yeah. I put chores on and I didn't know any of this when my kids were little. I discovered because I had that, I'm concerned about other people's kids being helpless. And, it turns out my own kids might be helpless. I became really invested in this when my own kids were maybe 12 and 10. Yeah, I didn't really get the meat cutting moment entirely when they were 10 and 8. I had some learning more to do. Yeah. I just lost my train of thought. Why is it? Yes. So I'm sorry of that age where thoughts go out of my mind. So some of your viewers and listeners can relate.
Absolutely.
So today I equate chores with food and sleep. You would not say, you know what, my kid's so busy, he can't eat dinner. Right? this is so important. They don't need sleep. Now we know parents are already compromising sleep. We have parent after parent saying, well, it's high school, it's junior year, so they can only sleep 4 hours a night. That's just the way it is. No, you should not be allowing that. That harms their mental health. It harms their physical development. It creates an intoxication that's like being intoxicated. You know, you shouldn't be compromising their sleep. You might already be. You're probably not yet compromising their food. Chores go with those things because that's what teaches personal responsibility, accountability, consequences, develops work ethic. Like, you want them to do chores so that they can go out in the world and thrive, people. I'm not saying make them like re-roof the house,
Right.
you know, or steam clean every
Right.
vacuum, every carpet. It's like dishwasher, dishes, garbage, recycling, lawn, snow, you know, laundry, dusting. Look, my son is struggling with anxiety right now, and he wouldn't mind me saying that. He gives me permission to tell this. He's always been a part of the narratives I've told, as has my daughter. And he's at home. It's COVID. He's taking time off college, and needs to earn some money. And he's got regular chores that he's been doing now for years. But we've put together a list of things that we would pay other people for outside of COVID, and what's a fair rate for those things around the house. And because he needs to earn money and he knows it. And so he's got a list of things he can do in our home. And if he does them, he gets paid. Not a lot, believe me. This is minimum wage kind of stuff. And so, you know, he'd like a whole lot more. He's not, but it's interesting to see how he's like, in his place of being stuck with his anxiety, which I understand and respect. It can lead you to this feeling like I can't get anything. I can't even get out of this. But there's this little dangle of like, but I need money. I want to earn money. Maybe I can make myself do something. He did a chore. I think it was, goodness, what was it? Cleaning the downstairs bathroom, right? And it took him twice as long as it might've taken me. He earned $9 for it. I mean, not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but the next day he's like, you know what? I did that. I'm going to do another one tomorrow. What else is on that list? You know? And it's slow, but you know, his little bank account is getting a little bit more money. And more important, he's like, look what I can do. Look, I can make things happen. Like, I'm seeing that in a kid who might have some learned helplessness. I'm seeing him decide this matters to me enough that I'm going to try to do it. Okay, I did do it. Okay, that felt pretty good in the grand scheme of things. It got me something. I'm watching that accrue. My husband and I are like,
yep,
you know?
Exactly right. It's like a snowball. It starts out tiny and small, but it gathers steam, that momentum, because it's addicting in a good way. That feeling of I can do it, that feeling of confidence, and a little bit breeds our desire to have a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's really, it's that buildup over time then that you go, oh, wow, look how far he's come.
I'm having an emotional moment right now because he went from I'll clean the downstairs bathroom, which by the way is the smallest bathroom. There's no tub or shower, you know, so the next day he was dusting the entire house with his earbuds in, singing. That's what's making me emotional. My son was going through the house with the dust, like into it, singing Hamilton or some rap songs or whatever was in his playlist at the top of his lungs. And just, you know, it was so beautiful. It's simple and beautiful. You know, that's the kind of thing that can make you go like, all right, we're on this journey next to him. We're trying to be the supportive, loving adults who care a lot, but not overly invested in every outcome. Just like, we're here for you. We care about you. You know, let us know how we can help. And it's these little indicators that just give me this sense of, you know, he's pulling himself forward, and it feels really good.
Absolutely. And to recognize the immense success of that, to not go, because sometimes people go, well, that's such a little thing. We've got all these. No, be in the moment and shine that spotlight on that thing that just happened and acknowledge that for him and for yourself.
Yeah. And yet don't overpraise it. Don't be like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. You're so amazing. Like, you did amazing, right? That is also overparenting.
That's
right. He's already getting.
Of course you did it.
You look him in the eye and you say, thank you so much for taking care of that. I appreciate you. And you look away and move on.
Yeah.
because they are hungry for that authentic
Mhm.
praise for something they actually did. The false praise
Mhm.
contributes to that learned helplessness. It's like, I'm being praised as amazing, but I didn't do an amazing thing.
Mhm.
That harms them in the aggregate. So you want to just be really specific and clear
Mhm.
about the thing they did. If he did something extra, one night I'd left a bunch of dishes at night are not his job. Um, but he had kind of done something that I consider to be my job.
Mhm.
And the next day I said, I came downstairs to this. Thank you so much. You know, I really appreciate it. Gave him a kiss and moved on. I know that praise, authentic and specific to his eyes, will lead him to want to do more things in life that result in like, oh, the people around me are pleased. By the way, I'm showing up to contribute to this thing we call a family.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so great. So great. I know that we need to get ready to wrap up here. I want to um, give you an opportunity to talk before we close out about the additional challenges of this current time that we're living with in, all of us, but particularly the stressors, the extra challenges, the issues for our parents, for our children, for our families who are Black, who are brown, who are not in, the white world that we have created here, that everything operates around. This is a really especially sensitive and challenging time, and I'd love for you to speak to that.
Thank you so much for raising that, Dr. Nicole. I identify as Black and biracial. I'm a very light-skinned Black woman, but I do identify as Black. My mother is white, which makes me also biracial. I can't speak for anybody but me, but I will say that I have felt in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, this tremendous positivity, because so many of my white friends and colleagues have finally awakened to what many of us have known for quite some time. And that's a good thing. It's frustrating that they've finally awakened, but I will overlook that because the awakening is important. That said, it has also been so hard to deal with everybody asking me, as their apparently only Black friend, like, what do I read? What do I do? I need to, like, all of a sudden, a lot of us are getting tapped as the resource for a whole lot of people that don't seem to realize that Google is a great way to, start to do your own research on issues. So that has been taxing. Every time a white person wants to know more information, it tells us they don't already know something, we've studied. It just, there's a lot of complexity to this. So to the Black and brown folks watching, I know that it's been incredibly hard. This week that we happen to be taping in is a week in which the president did not denounce white supremacy. And I have found that I didn't realize until I was bursting into tears the day after and the day after. I didn't realize how much it was lodged in my spirit, the fear of what I have sensed is coming for some time. White supremacy is on the rise in America. It is armed, it is dangerous, and it is coming. And this is our America, and we are as much a part of it as anybody who has a hateful ideology. And so I'm calling on all of us to love ourselves through this, hold ourselves and our loved ones close, but also ask, what are my grandchildren going to want to know about this time? And what am I going to tell them I did? And what am I going to do today so that I can be proud to tell my grandchildren how I stood up to this incredibly violent ideology that is embedded in so many structures. And I think, that's what my tears are about. It's just all a lot right now. And it's hard to be the parents our kids need and deserve when we're struggling too. So we have to find spaces for ourselves where we can invest in our own self-care so that we can kind of do that and then, shake it off and get back into the kitchen and, make a meal with our children who need to learn how to use the stove. It all matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just what you said there is so powerful for parents. Give yourself the grace and the space to acknowledge that things are hard now. If you're dealing with these things, and to realize that we all have things in our parenting journey that we're struggling with at one point or another. Nobody expects us to be perfect 100% of the time. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. So that grace and space is important. And then that also, like you said, shaking it off and saying, okay, what do we need to get to today with our kids? So I appreciate you sharing that from the heart. I think that's really important, and I'm really committed to making sure that perspective is being heard, not just by the people who are Black and brown, but really by those of us who are white, needing to hear that and needing to acknowledge the reality of that we can't understand because we're not living it. And so I'm grateful for you, to you for sharing that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do. It's great that you asked me that. I appreciate it.
I would like to, as we close here, make sure that people know where they can find out more about you, your books, your upcoming book, which I know isn't going to launch till next year, but I want to put it on people's radars to make sure they get it.
Absolutely. It is pre-orderable, so I'm grateful to you for that. And I've got a copy of the jacket folded over How to Raise an Adult. So this is the first book, How to Raise an Adult. My second book on race is Real American, my memoir on being Black and biracial in white spaces. But this guy, Your Turn, is the sequel to this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. You're the first person to say it correctly. I want that emphasis, how to be an adult. A lot of people say Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. I'm like, no, it's How to Be an Adult. This is for 18 to 34-year-olds struggling with #adulting, and you see them in your practice. Yep. This is it's not about them. It's not a critique of them. This is me saying, hey, yeah, I know it's terrifying, but you gotta. I'm here for you. I get it. Yes, I know. Yep. And you gotta, and I'm rooting for you. That's the voice of this book. It'll be out April 6th. It's pre-orderable wherever you can pre-order books. So I would love for folks to do that. I'm very excited about this book. There's a lot of good stuff packed into it. So yeah, thanks. And then there's my website, julielythcott-haims.com. My social handles are jlythcott-haims. All of this will be in the show notes, so I won't throw up my little slide that has all of that. Yeah, so thanks. I would love, please follow me. I'm very interactive with people who follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, so please do.
And the content on your social media is great. I really want to encourage everybody to go and engage with Julie's social media channels. Just a wealth of great information and support, and you are very interactive, and that's so cool. And then your website's a great source of information, and the books, absolutely. If you have not already read the first book, How to Raise an Adult, start there for sure. The new book's not coming out until the spring, so it gives you plenty of time to catch up and get this one read now. This is just absolutely in my top 5 reading list for all parents. So please get this book and then pre-order the new book. And Julie, I would love if at some point in the future we can have you back, maybe after your new book comes out, and we can continue the conversation and talk about that. I have absolutely loved spending time with you today and having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'd love to come to Grand Rapids, and I'd love to come back on the show. So thank you. And yes to next time.
Awesome. Fantastic. And thank you to all of you, as every week, for being here and listening. We will catch you back here next week for our next episode of the Better Behavior Show.